an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Magicians, Season 4, Episode 2. Lost, Found, Fucked. In this episode, Julia manages to break the spell. Meanwhile, Quentin is in Greece, killing pigs and getting his arm broke. Quentin, buddy, I'm sorry. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So first of all, thank you very much to Ashley for commissioning this episode. High five, Ashley. Y'all, this episode was sort of crazy. I wasn't really ready. I have a feeling I'm just not really ready for what Quentin's character is. Elliot. What do we call it? Just the monster? Because I feel like I want to give it a different name, and I don't know what that would be. But the monster, I mean, it's really kind of unfortunate that they used up the name The Beast on what should clearly have been the Mothman, because I feel like the Beast would be a pretty good one here. But I just want to say again how much I appreciate the subtlety of Elliot's performance here. He is really getting across this evil that isn't there has to be, for evil to really exist in my mind, there has to be a real malice behind it. And I just don't really feel that with the monster the way that I did with the Mothman. The Mothman was angry and hurt and lashing out and trying to punish and generally make other people suffer for the fun of it. The monster seems to have no understanding of beings beyond itself and the person that it is closest with. There's this sort of attachment that it has to Quentin, because I assume once Quentin agreed to take over that other girl's place, it sort of created a magical contract, something that I imagine is binding the two of them beyond just the fact that he was closer to the monster when it, I don't think it's an accident that the monster found him out of everybody. I think that's part of what Quentin agreed to. And it seems to, because of that, have sort of latched onto Quentin in almost I don't really want to say a parental role, because obviously Quentin isn't telling this thing what to do. He has no authority over it. But there is a childlike quality to this monster, even as it's cutting people's throats, that is detached in the way that kids can be. And those of you who have children or who have worked with children know what I'm talking about. That kids before a certain age can be straight up sociopathic because they just don't have the understanding of cause and effect yet. They don't yet really grasp empathy, and they will say things without thinking or do things without considering the effect on people around them. And so when this Elliot creature begins to kill that poor kid who's like given him jimmies instead of sprinkles, even though they are the same thing, it doesn't feel like it's even exactly out of anger. It's just sort of like, oh, there goes another one that I don't want. Like he has decided to fashion the world around him after exactly who he wants participating. And this one dude did not fulfill his side of the bargain, which was to give him sprinkles. So yeah, he just decides like, I'm taking you out of the game. And there's like a real dispassion there. I have not yet seen him hurt anybody for fun. Like, and that's the thing, is that even though he's saying, will you play with me? And this whole thing is being treated as if it's a game. There feels like actually in this episode, there's an objective. He is after something. He's trying to find something that he doesn't even know what it is. And I think that adds an interesting element to things, because it was locked in this castle, and everybody's been told the story about how it's like the most evil thing on two legs. More than that, but we don't really know what he is, where he comes from, why he is the way that he is. This is an evil so ancient and upsetting and frightening to gods that they built a custom castle to contain it, and made a nearly impossible quest just to get the keys to open it. And yet we don't really know anything about what was in that castle at all. It's out. It's amongst us. It's killing people. What do we know, though? And I am really curious. I would love if Quentin would engage with it a little bit more and just ask it what it's after. Because, and I don't mean just in terms of whatever, searching for what was stolen from it, because like I said, it doesn't know what it is that it's even searching for. But there's more to this, I think, than what we know about it. And I feel very interested in that aspect of things. And I think the very fact that he doesn't know what he's looking for, that might be all. He may be this monster, may simply be like the futility of existence that exists in so many of us. There is a sense to him when we first meet the woman who is in charge of managing him in last season. She says something about how he has, it's never enough, that he always wants games. He always wants to be entertained. He always wants more. And when he's talking to Quentin and he says, I'm trying to get it back, they took it from me. And Quentin's like, well, what did they take? And he says, I don't know. But there's like this feeling of not being whole. I am like, is this a creature incapable of experiencing or understanding love? Is that the missing piece? Is it searching for that connection that it will never find? Is it just like this deep, like this sense that I have experienced in my life, and I'm sure others have as well, of wanting more out of life, wanting some sort of meaning, and feeling like that's never really going to appear? It feels like there's something more existential happening, in other words, with this monster than just the simplicity of the beast from season 1, who had a bone to pick and had a goal, and he was heading after it and was trying to defeat them. This is something that I'm not sure you can beat, because I don't know that there is an answer to its question. it's very possible nothing was ever taken from him. And that is simply his state of being, is feeling unwhole forever. And that's pretty bleak. But I guess we'll see. You know, I just don't know enough to really theorize, but I'm just super curious about this. So, okay, let's start off the episode now that I've talked for 10 fucking minutes. So we start off in Greece, and Elliot and Quentin have turned up, and Elliot is looking at the like ruins of this temple. Poor Quentin is just like, where are we right now? He's still Brian at this point. And Elliot says, things grow old so fast, don't they? Which is really interesting. It's like it's like he was just here, and he's just kind of like, wow, that happened quick. And it's an interesting look into how old a being he is. And it turns out that he teleported them to Greece super easily. Quentin takes out a cigarette, and Elliot lights it with just the tip of his finger, which I found really fun. I want to know, I assume that because he is like the supernatural creature, I assume he doesn't have to rely on the, what's the word? The allotments of magic that human beings have to rely on. I'm not positive of that, but I feel like he is practically a god, and the gods don't seem affected by this at all. So I'm going to just assume that has not had any effect on him either. So he says that they are looking for the god of war. And Quentin says, I thought that was Ares. And he says, say that when you see him. It makes him so mad. His name is actually Enyalius. Now, part of me wants to look this up, but I'm not gonna, because I am 100% positive that there will be spoilers. But is this a real god? I assume this came from somewhere, but I don't know. Might not. Maybe it's invented. But yeah, Enyalius, god of war. So yeah, when he says Ares, I love that Elliot doesn't say, don't tell him you thought that. He's specifically like, oh yeah, please say that. He gets so pissed. So then he tells Quentin to go into the woods and get a pig. It turns out that they need a young pig to sacrifice in order to summon this god. And when he asks, can't you just conjure one up? Elliot says, no, it has to be caught with human hands and stained with human effort, that stuff that comes out of your skin. Quentin says, what? I really enjoyed this entire scene and the way that Elliot plays this when Quentin asks him a question, and there's almost a feeling of like this thing is like using Elliot's shell to communicate, but it doesn't exactly emote properly because it doesn't like have any connection with emotions. So when it responds to Quentin's questions, there's a lag time between when Quentin asks and this thing answers, almost as if it's processing his question and accessing like data in a hard drive before it actually responds to him, which I find deeply creepy and kind of like perfect for what this is meant to be. And I would love to know whether that was the director explaining for him to play it, whether he was deciding to play it that way himself, or if I'm just sort of reading into that. But this like detachment again is so unnerving. So we go back to Marina's apartment, and everybody is getting off the floor after having been knocked out, and they are exactly who they had been. It is, the spell did not work. She did not do what she wanted. And she is like, I think, a little bit impressed that spell is as intense as it is. And they have to figure out an alternative here, but she's starting to figure out she thinks, because of the way I think their faces were like whipping back and forth when she was doing the spell, I think she has started to get a sense of who they might be. And that is all solidified when her phone rings. And it's Dean Fogg on the phone. And it's like a message, I think. This is Dean Fogg. Whoever you are, do not tamper with my enchantment. Some fucking Josh yells, holy shit, it's James Earl Jones. Oh my God, Josh, stop it. Yes, you've triggered a read-me file voicemail. And no, you may not take me off speakerphone. You will not circumvent or defeat this spell. Whoever you are, walk away now, or your death is as certain as those I've enchanted. Marina remains unimpressed, which is par for the course. So yeah, she is figuring out now, because that this is Dean Fogg, that this has to be his favorite students, his pet students, as she puts it, which makes sense because even in her timeline that she is originally from, that was how they were being treated. And I really, really enjoy that she starts to get a sense of who Penny likely is. This scene with Penny, guys, all the scenes with Penny have just been, it is amazing. So she grabs him by like the waistband of his pants and like yanks him towards her and calls him like stud. And he gets this like little giggle, and she slaps him in the face in response to this giggle, which just makes him like smile with more excitement. He is just either the most stoned all the time, or just enjoys life to such a degree that I wish I could ever achieve. And she manages to pull this spell off of him. And it turns out that this is one of the thing that kept him from traveling. And so he begins to travel in short bursts all over the apartment. And it's interesting because like, even though he doesn't have any actual like memory of this, he isn't traveling into space. He isn't traveling across countries. He is traveling in pretty controlled bursts. It's not totally controlled, but because he winds up on the counter with his foot in the chips. But nevertheless, it's more control than I would have expected, considering how long it's been since he did this and how he has no memory of doing it. And at this point, finally, Josh looks up and realizes that Janet is not here, aka Margot. So we cut to her. She is in Fillory in the woods. She's bending down near this lake to get some water. And this hand reaches out and just yanks her full body into the water. It's honestly a pretty freaky moment. I did not care for it. So when she comes out, she's in this weird like subterranean cave. And there's this sort of like combo frog golem guy here who has apparently been put in charge of her birthing box. And this is, I would assume, and this is where I'm not clear, because the thing that Julia destroys, I didn't expect it to affect absolutely everybody. I thought that was going to be step one in a series of things that they needed to take care of because of this box being here. But I assume that this contains information about who she is that has been like taken from her. And he doesn't quite explain it because you can't. That's part of the enchantment, is that you can't talk to her directly about like, you know, who she is and what she really is. But yeah, he tells her that she can't get anywhere near it because it will destroy her. And that he like took her in, and he says, and I'm going to back this up. She says, I'm trying to figure out who I am. And I know that I'm somebody else. And he says, yes, as I said, you're safe down here. So she can like at least talk about it. But your birthright box, sorry, not birthing box, birthright box. I have been assigned to guard it as dictated by your absence from the kingdom, your loss of self, and your return this day and hour. But I must caution, it also predicted that you would learn what it is to live and rule alone. Which, that's really like kind of Margot's deal, I guess, anyway. I'm just curious what would change there. I hope that like nothing happens to Fen, which it has been my honor to guard, dictated your absence from the kingdom, right? Your loss of self and your return. So what exactly is this thing? Because I thought it had something to do with the spell, but maybe it doesn't. It might be a totally separate deal. I don't know. But yeah, she wants to like get near it, and he just like makes sure to keep her away. And when he says you'll figure out what it is to live and rule alone, she's just like, yeah, that's how I do things. And I'm like, yeah, that kind of just feels like who she is already. I don't know. Is Elliot never going to come back? Because she's always at least had him. But I don't even really want to think about that, to be honest. I don't even want to contemplate that. So he had told her that she was safe down there to talk about it, but it's not entirely true, because when she begins discussing the fact that she like rules and who she is, things begin to shake pretty badly. And he says, you must find the god who summoned you in the dream. And says eventually, please accept my apologies. I can't keep you as safe as I had hoped, because it begins rumbling as he says that. And he brings her up out of the lake again onto the shore. I feel so bad because she's like in this gorgeous white pantsuit. I mean, the absolute opposite of what you want to be wearing for this location. And is crawling up wet and muddy out of the water. Please return when the spell is lifted. Here's your lunch, and throws her a live fish, which she, like a boss, is going to kill later. She manages getting interrupted, but for a minute there, she's just about to be like, I guess this is my life now. I'm hungry. I gotta eat. No use whining about it. Here we go. Respect that. I really do. Huggabug says, I think the birthright box has something to do with being king and ruling Fillory, not the identity spell. Yeah, I guess so. Because I just assumed that they were like linked. But now that I'm like kind of going back over it, I'm like, I guess that's not even mentioned. He mentions the spell because of the effect it's having, but he doesn't say anything about it in conjunction with the box. So might not be anything. Michael Kiosky says this frogman needs his own show. Disagree, Michael. I don't think that I could stomach looking at this dude for much longer than we do here. There is just something like, even things that have like slimy, damp skin don't get me too bad. But when that slimy, damp skin is also extremely pale, that's when I draw the line, because it looks like human flesh that's just been decaying in water. Like there's just something, or it looks like Papa John. It's either or, which is equally bad. So, all right, let's go to Dean Fogg's office, because here we have Marina poking around, trying to figure some things out. And it's amazing when she's in there just like dicking around. Todd is right there on the typewriter and does not notice that they are there. And she uses some magic to knock Todd out. And of course, I'm forgetting every time that this happens that magic is rationed. So when she does this shit, she's using up magic for the day. Like anything that she does here, it's like, you know, it's going to be really eating into their supply. So she finds this bottle, and I saw it and I was like, doesn't that just look like exactly what it is that he used? And long story short, that's exactly what it is. And her idea here is to use the same potion on Dean Fogg and in forcing him to cure himself, find out what the antidote is. And so when she catches him and injects him in the neck with it and says, so what's the antidote? And he says there is no antidote. She reacts with total scorn. She is not buying that for a second. I think there's a part of her that's almost insulted that he would even try that line with her. But he isn't going to change his mind as far as he is concerned. This is what's keeping these kids alive, and he does not want their deaths on his hands. So he is not interested, even at the risk of his own life being taken from him. He is not interested in helping her unmask them because it's just too dangerous. The risk is too great, which I have to admit, I kind of admire. Like, that's a pretty badass stance to take. Also, I really enjoy that he is so irritated with Todd because there's like multiple moments where he comes very close to saying, just as Margot has, fucking Todd. And it would be appropriate. Back in Fillory, meanwhile, Margot gets gripped up by some Fillorian soldiers who have found her while she's about to stab a fish. And they cut from her being picked up to a meeting of Finn, who is the acting High King, and her cabinet, I assume. And they are all at this like table falling asleep. And I was so confused by this. Once you find out what it is, it's pretty good because like you're watching this and you're just like, how could this possibly, like, she's also trying not to yawn. So at first I thought everybody was just being mad disrespectful, that maybe they felt like Finn didn't really deserve the position that she's in, that she was a joke, and that they were all like, oh, I'm going to either pretend to fall asleep or genuinely fall asleep because fuck this woman who I don't care about or respect. But then you see that she's yawning too. And I was like, oh, okay. It's not at all what I thought. So here comes Tick running in, and he explains to her that there is an urgent matter and summons her away. And I have to stop for a second, you guys, and talk about this motherfucking outfit that motherfucking Fenn is wearing in this motherfucking scene. I think out of all the outfits that we have seen so far, even including some of Margot's more spectacular outfits, this one for me gets top marks. I can't really say why, because it's not even as outrageous or as beautiful, but there is something about this that just fucking kills me. I think it's the layers of fabric and the texture of everything, but she's got this sort of like orangey coral silk slacks, and then this like sort of accordion like pleated blouse that comes down to her knees and splits in front, and over all of that, this amazing like silvery green jacket, also with this heavily pleated lapels and this belt. Like, this whole look is absolutely slaying. And I am so delighted to see that it's Fenn wearing it, because often she doesn't get the great outfits. She's been made to wear a lot more, I won't even say frumpy, but much similar or more traditionally feminine, and in many ways meant to look, I think, very conservative outfits. And the fact that she is wearing something like this here, to me, means that she has come much more into her power, and that there is that she has more confidence, because I never really felt like she wore what she was wearing before because she particularly liked it. I think it was just meant to be an indication of her, innocence is the wrong word because we know that she isn't, but it's more that it's like she was fine with sort of like not being important or noticeable. I guess is really what it was. So I don't know. This feels like important to me. I'm just fucking loving this whole outfit so much. So they go and see Margot, who of course looks like somebody else. I love when Fen sees her and she says, "You look nothing like her." And I'm like, that's not true. She looks quite a bit like her. It's not, you wouldn't really mistake her for the other unless you are me and not paying enough attention. But yeah, they do. But I kind of like that line is there. And Tick has explained to her that this person has, claimed that they are High King and, that there is some sort of spell on them. And I think it's Fen who says her actual name, Margot, and all of a sudden the flames in all of the torches leap. And there is a moment where it looks like nothing is going to happen because Tick has already warned her about this. But then there is a thud and something like falls off the ceiling like a sconce or something. And I love Tick looking at her and going, "See, there it is." So yeah, it's very quickly being sort of proven that this is a real enchantment that's on her. That's not a coincidence. And they explain that there has been an emergency situation in Fillory for a minute because there is like straight up opium in the air in much higher saturation than normal. That there always has been some, and I feel like that detail was mentioned last season, but I completely forgot about it. It might have even been mentioned first season. So they always have had some opium in the air, but at this point it is much more contaminated than usual. And this has caused a lot of people to either get very sleepy and, just fall asleep, and which you wouldn't think is that harmful, except depending on where and when you are, when that happens to you, it can kill you. For some people, it just makes them giddy. And then there have been people who have like gotten naked and died of exposure because they were like basically stoned and out dancing buck ass nude. So yeah, it's like kind of a joke, but also has very serious sort of consequences. And I really, this is exactly the kind of problem that I could see Fillory dealing with. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. So this is when Margot explains the whole thing with the god. And the fact that she has been tasked with having to find the god and that it summoned her. And they're like kind of surprised because allegedly Ember has returned and they are thinking that might have something to do with this. And it's like, well, why would Umber have come to you in a dream and been like, you need to go and save them? Because there is like a uninvited god on Fillorian soil. If it's my brother, that doesn't make sense. And this whole, like, we all know that Ember is dead. So either he like somehow rose from the dead, which certainly he's a god, that's certainly possible, or something else real weird and janky is going on. And we wind up finding out exactly what that is, but we will get there in a minute. So let's cut back to Julia. Julia is with Todd, and she is sharing her frustration with him about the fact that she does not feel like she belongs here, that she is no good with magic, because he is the one that greeted her when she first got here. And he, by the way, with everything that like happened with Dean Fogg, he is not a good secret keeper and is absolutely dying to just tell Julia what is going on here, and comes really, really close and pretty much gives most of the game away by just being like, oh yeah, Dean Fogg is actually going to be leaving soon. And when she knows that she doesn't exactly belong here. She's not showing any signs of actual magical talent. So she knows that if Dean Fogg is gone, that there goes the only person who would really consider her worth staying. So then what? What happens when he goes? Why should she remain? And it's a very valid concern. I love the fact that Todd does not know how to handle this information. Like, he just is so bad at this. Oh, Todd, babe. So we're going to deal with Julia in a little bit, but first I want to talk about Dean Fogg and his deciding to put all of his affairs in order before his memory disappears, because he has one day. This is amazing and possibly one of my favorite things that's ever happened on the show. I will never not love this. So Marina told him, you have a day to decide to tell me what the antidote is, or you're going to be turned into somebody who likes living in cardboard boxes, or doesn't even likes living in. Just that's what he does. We wind up finding out that she basically turned him into her dad, which is fucked up, but that's a whole other issue. So she is leaving him no choice, but he decides to make the choice anyway. And he goes around to everybody that he has ever known. And he not only takes care of shit, but he has Todd take notes on all of it. I assume that part of this is so that he can not only set affairs in order, but I am wondering if he hasn't set something in place to try and remind himself of who he was later on, like a notebook style thing. But maybe not. It might have just been for his own edification. I just don't really see why he would have needed Todd to take notes if that weren't going to come into play eventually, but we'll see. So there is a lot of confrontation that he needs to do. So he goes up to this guy, Walter. You're the best drinking companion I've ever had. And Walter says, thanks. We've only drank together twice. And he says, I'm a high-functioning alcoholic, Walter. We prefer to do our serious drinking alone so that when we weep, we can wallow in self-loathing without embarrassment. Then stops. Did you get that, Todd? Fantastic. Excellent. Walter, in my office bar is an unopened bottle of 1977 Holcroft single malt that I was going to drink if I ever committed suicide. Enjoy, my dear friend. Y'all, this is just so amazing. I can't. I have to read them all. He goes to his bookie. It's not your fault I'm always broke, Ashley. I'm a degenerate gambler who can use magic to alter the outcome of any game. But then I couldn't relive the secret shame I've held since I was 2 years old. What I crave most in the world is the degradation of losing. Thank you for every single moment of that. To which she says, you're $56 short. I love that Todd says gold. And then we have just a monologue. Magic has been a brutal series of disappointments, and after having lived 40 timelines, 39 of which range from the comically horrendous to the apocalyptically absurd, to find it was all for nothing, well, leaving this life is actually feeling a little liberating. Then this dude comes out carrying his big bulging briefcase. The dean, who has been drinking from a flask, hands his flask to Todd, gets up, and just decks this guy in the fucking face. Like, that is a serious punch. That is no joke. Todd asks who this guy is, and the dean hands him, like throws, actually, a handkerchief to the guy to clean up his head, which is bleeding, and yells, tell Jennifer I said thank you and goodbye. And Todd says, okay, what? And he says, I had an affair with his wife. He behaved abominably. I had an affair with his wife and he behaved abominably. I am dying to know what the fuck this guy did, that even after fucking that man's wife, the dean is like, no, I get to punch you and you deserve it still. Because, wow, what did he do? I am so curious. Back to my childhood. I was raised by my grandmother, the kindest, wisest person I ever knew. Of course, I could never tell her that because all forms of intimacy horrify me. And then we go back, we cut ahead to him like editing the horrifying and changing it to terrify the hell out of me, which #relatable, to be honest. So he is in the middle of this when Juliet comes in and shares with him her, worries about whether or not she is even going to be able to stay here if he leaves and somebody else takes over who does not see that she has the potential that he seems to see in her. She says it's not his fault because he yells about Todd. He's upset and I am too. So the dean has her sit down and he says, I probably owe you an explanation. My life is mostly made up of regrets. I'm not looking for contradiction or pity. It's just a fact I'm suddenly forced to face. But of all my many regrets, the greatest is something I did very recently to some of the most maddeningly millennial students I ever had. And as he says this, a bunch of bottles lift off of a table and he has to do a bit of magic to get them to fall down again. And she's like, what was that? And he says, advantage of being the spellcaster. So we know that these things were about to throw themselves over at them, but he is able to prevent that. He says, I'll never be able to correct what I did to them. But Kim, one day you might. You have no idea what you're capable of. I do. And she says, if you want me to help these students, you have to tell me who they are. And he explains really in pretty great detail about his spell and erasing their identities and that the spell has been cast on me and that's what's going on with him having to leave and the whole thing. And it takes her a little while, but eventually she reaches the conclusion that he did this to her also. And that is why he has been so weird about everything. But yeah, he is trusting that eventually she will be able to undo what it is that he did, which I am really curious about. She does, but I want to know why he thinks she of everybody can, because there is something about her abilities that showed up and got her re-invited to break bills that didn't happen with everyone else. So why? What is that about? So then the dean goes and does something that I didn't really understand. He goes up to the bottles and he rips his lapel. And when he does that, we see the reflection of his face in a little, what do you call it? Like a bowl of what looks like the same liquor in the bottle. So I don't know why he rips his lapel. I don't know what that is meant to be, but I'm assuming that they poured some of the liquor from that same bottle into this bowl, and that connection between it being part of the bottle in his office is what's allowing them to sort of spy on him. But it is a really like that thing with the lapel I didn't really understand. And apparently ripping the lapel means that he is just not going to back down. So everybody who is spying on him realizes that there is no backup to this plan. This is all they got. Penny, meanwhile, is like, well, thanks for trying. It's appreciated that you're trying to figure us out, even though you don't have any vested interest in this. To which Marina says, it's common knowledge that I'm a very selfless, cool person who likes to help others. I enjoy Marina so much. I really, really do. Meanwhile, Katie is reading the comic book that their lives are based on. And Josh is trying to look on the bright side. Hugabug says he rips it because it's an excuse to call his tailor and talk to her later. Oh. Okay, cool. Thank you. I would never have pieced that together. I should have, he probably mentions it, but it's just such a quick thing and I'm so distracted by this woman showing up. So Josh is trying to look on the bright side in terms of their characters that they're based on from this comic book being complex characters. She says Isaac's big problem is his dick is too big. And Josh is like, no, but seriously, that is a problem. And honestly, it sounds like a fake problem, but it is no joke. I, as a woman, have dated guys who were borderline too big and it was uncomfortable. And I have known more than one woman who has dated guys who were genuinely too big and they tried everything and it was just not going to happen. And they simply could not have sex with a guy, which bummer. So as much as it does sound like a non-problem problem, and as much as it is sort of like, there is much worse that could be done to you, that probably is extremely frustrating. And I feel for him on that. But they're talking about how all of them have their issues. And Katie's like, not me though. My character is perfect. And I always do things to help people. And I'm always the one who steps in and is the hero. I don't do anything wrong. And they're like, so what's the problem? You sound really awesome. And she's like, I sound fake. I am not a real person. Everything that's awesome about me isn't real. Oh, there's this whole thing with Hansel as well. First of all, he's like, my life is pretty dope. I'm not totally sure I even want to just give this all up for some other identity that I don't even know what that's like. And then she says something about how he slept with his stepsister. And there's this whole weirdness around that. Ooh, there's a side effect of being written or being created around a character from a comic book that I would never have thought of, but that really is messed up. Is that if all people need to do is read it to know what your dirty secrets are. Wow, that sucks. So yeah, this is pretty funny. But yeah, Katie is just not here for this. She wants authenticity. And I respect that. I do. I can't really relate. I feel like I might just, I don't know, be all right with my cool life, but maybe it's fine. I don't know. So we go over to Fillory again, and Margot has decided, well, so this god is supposed to be wanting me to deal with this thing. And then this other god has risen from the dead. So let's track this fucking god down and figure this all out. And apparently he's been partying his way up and down the, all of Fillory, basically. I was going to say the coastline, but it's more than that. And they have plotted out all of his movements and figured out the places that he has been. And they have to figure from that where he will wind up next. And it seems like the most likely place is the hair on the ass inn. I enjoy her reaction to this so much because he points it out and it's this the sign is a picture of a donkey with a rabbit hair. I say rabbit hair even though they're not the same, but just to get it across what it means, sitting on its back. And she says whimsy. I fucking hate it. And you know what, guys? I'm starting to realize that I tend to hate whimsy too. I don't always. There are times where I'm like, you know what? This is fine. I mean, obviously, the first Harry Potter books especially are full of whimsy. And so a lot of that I'm just like, okay, that's fine. Stuff that's like tends to be geared more towards kids, the whimsy doesn't tend to irritate me as much. But when it's like whimsy that's super duper self-aware, and it tends to be aimed more for adults, I have so much less patience with it. I just really identify with Margot in a lot of ways. It's weird too, considering like that I have this community around me from Unspoiled, how separate from it I can feel sometimes. And I guess that's like a part of being the leader, is that you're never really a part of things the way that other people are, because you have to be in charge and be the one to make calls on things and disappoint people or separate people out or whatever. So there's a lot about her, like, kind of doing things alone, and the whole be alone, rule alone thing. I'm not personally alone. I have Owen, but there's still something about it that I really relate to. I've always just been kind of somebody who had trouble connecting to other people. And it's not because I don't have empathy. It's not because, it's just always just, it's been hard. And I think that's also partially because I have a lot of walls up because I don't trust people very much. And she doesn't either. I get her a lot. So we cut to Quentin and Elliot. And Elliot is holding this adorable little baby pig. And he says to Quentin, so there was a whole family of them, huh? What happened to the mother pig? And Quentin winces, but does not say anything. And Elliot puts the pig on the altar and says that you have to kill it. He won't come without a sacrifice. And it's not the same if I do it. You have to do it. And Quentin backs away. This is the point where he's just like, dude, I am just a regular old person. I am not your pal or your playmate, which, wrong thing to say, my friend, but here we are. And I'm not scared of you anymore, so why don't you just fucking kill me? To which Elliot says, I would never do that, and just twitches one finger and breaks Quentin's arm. Really, really breaks it. Is brutal. And this is one of those things where people are just like, well, I would rather suffer death. And I'm like, yeah, death, big whoop, death. Torture? No, sir. I do not think I am up for that shit. Thank you. Good night. Absolutely not. I do not blame Quentin one single solitary bit for caving here. Not even a little bit. People who are able to withstand torture and still not give their torturer what they want are the kind of strong that I don't think I will ever be. And I'm okay with that. I'm not even like, I hope to be that strong one day. Do I? I don't think so. Like, even if you give them the information and they kill you in the end anyway, at least you're dead. At least you're not dealing with that fucking pain and horror anymore. So that's fine. Just kill me then. But anyway, so here we go with the Dean and Ella, I think is the name of his seamstress, his tailor. And Etta, my bad. This actress is so familiar and I cannot place where I know her from. But she fixes his lapel with just a wave of her hand. And apparently there is a new suit that she has been working on for him that is not finished yet. And she thinks that he has summoned her to ask about that. And she opens her bag and shows it to him in progress. It's a really cute moment of him like trying to be sort of normal with her, while obviously getting a little bit choked up over the fact that, like, here's something that he took for granted about his life that he will not be able to get back. And this relationship with her is really interesting because it seems like she knows him better than a lot of people do. So yeah, this whole thing is really, she asks him to smell the suit, and he does. And then he bursts into tears. And she's like, what is going on? And he says, that is my grandmother's huckleberry pie. And she says, what? What are you talking about? I'm not totally sure what that's about. Is this something that she made smell that way? Or are her clothes just designed to smell like something special too? Is it like Amortentia, where you smell whatever is like the most attractive to you, and that's just sort of a built-in feature of the clothing? I am super duper curious about it. I don't really get this. Ashley says she played Anna Nardini, April's mom, on Gilmore Girls. I never watched that. I watched one episode. She also played the date with a wooden leg on Friends. Ooh, I don't remember that either. Hugabug says, I think he wants to talk to her before he loses his memory and he doesn't feel like they are close enough to just call her and talk. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So he explains to her the whole thing with the comic book and choosing that it had a lot of characters in it with detailed backstories. And because of that, it was just easier to do the spell. And he says, I am about to live a version of it, though I am assured it's not quite as nice. And, oh man, guys, it is pretty rough once it happens. And she tells him that she's known him 23 years and she's known him dearly every moment, fully aware that he can barely stand himself. And that made me sad, but it also made you my best customer because your clothing was your armor. And it was the way that he kind of kept the world at bay. And then there's the scene with him and Julia in the hallway where she confronts him about being one of them. And he walks away. And when she turns around, he is gone. So I guess this new identity, it doesn't just transform you and there you are still standing where you were. It transforms you and teleports you to a whole new place. And then we see him standing outside of Marina's apartment. And he is her father. She made him into her father, which is the weirdest, and I don't know what to make of it. Like, because she says the biggest loser I ever buried. So her father's dead. So she based him on somebody who is not alive. He's not going to run into himself. Is this her just wanting to torture her father and enjoy tormenting him? Is that what this is about? Damn. And she grabs his cup because he's like, asking for spare change. And she grabs his cup and empties it out and walks away. It was pretty intense. Shit. Cold-blooded. I am almost out of time. I can't believe how much time passed. Oh my God. I have not been keeping an eye on the clock. Well, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Hugabug says it's the worst existence she could think to subject to the Dean to, I think. Yeah, I suppose so. Does the Dean he doesn't remember who he is, right? So he thinks that he is her father. I wonder if it counts as punishment if you don't remember who you really are. I feel like it would be more punishment if you remember and nobody else believes you. But I don't know. Anyway, so I have to hurry. I'm sorry. The whole thing with Quentin and Elliot really wraps pretty quick in the grand scheme of things. Because he summons this god, and when the god appears, and he's just kind of like this southern biker guy, he tells him, give it back. And we find out later that he doesn't even know what he means by that. And he opens him up and like searches through the dude's body, like cuts him open. It's really brutal to watch. Does not find it. And then figures out shortly after that this dude is not actually the god, that this is one of the god's lackeys that he sent instead. So, the search continues. And Quentin, well, I'll back up a little bit. Julia finds the source of the spell that is keeping all of their identities stable. And she just attacks it over and over again, overloading it with magic because it's kind of a self-sustaining engine. While Todd, initially very concerned because she dies, gets more and more bored watching her fly across the room and repeatedly die and come back and die and come back, until finally she manages to overpower it completely and break it. And when she does that, it completely opens all of them up so that their regular identities return. The fake identities break. And it's really fun. I really enjoy all of their reactions to suddenly returning to themselves. And I like Quentin being where he is and not even reacting that strongly because he's just kind of like, yeah, this makes sense. I'm with this fucking creature. Of course I am. When Margot is returned to her identity, she is in the hair on the ass, and they have discovered that it's not actually Ember isn't back. This is fucking Bacchus pretending to be Ember and just going around and fucking partying. So when she gets returned to herself, he just dismisses her. There's a pretty great moment of her like being up in his face, but then he reminds us all that he's a goddamn god and can do what he wants. Get it? And it's kind of humbling. Yikes. The dean has like only a very tiny amount of time as this other person and comes back to himself right away. And then Quentin, when he's up with against this creature, is he starts to do the spell and it puts its fingers up to just sort of stop him, and he does, and watches this like body fall to the ground and is just like, well, yeah, of course I'm here now. This is what my life is. There's something about his resignation that I find really amusing. So Quentin asks him about what it is he's looking for. We find out that the creature doesn't know. And then Elliot's like, Quentin says, can I ever get Elliot back? And the creature says, do you like him more than me? And starts to get really, really, really upset. And especially because Elliot was the one who tried to kill him. So that's particularly a betrayal. And he says, you miss him. You miss all your friends. And finally, Quentin's like, yeah, I do. He doesn't he doesn't deny it. He doesn't even nod. He just kind of has his face like he can't deny it, and immediately Elliot teleports them back to the place where all of the rest of his friends are, which is Marina's apartment. And they can all sort of vaguely remember what their old lives were, the fake ones, but it's not super distinct. It doesn't feel like the amount of time has passed that apparently has passed. And in walks Elliot, the creature, with Quentin. And I don't know how many of them are aware of what Elliot is, but they can tell something is fucking wrong. especially from the way that Quentin is acting and telling them all to stay back. And Elliot just looks at them all and says, "I'm not here to play." And his eyes get red, and that is the end of the episode. So, yeah. Lots happening, guys. Lots. All right. I'm so over time. I have to go. But thank you guys so much for coming. I've been really enjoying covering this show. I had some doubts in season 1, but they've been doing some really interesting stuff. So, man, I'm glad that the Dean doesn't have to be subjected to that for too long, and I admire his sacrifice. Good for you, Dean. All right, everybody. I will be seeing you soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.